Sister location presented two of the wildest and most unusual Easter eggs in the franchise. In the breaker room, while trying to bring all systems online, we see a map of Circus Baby's entertainment and rentals, but we also see other map layouts that are connected to the rental facility. And the other one being, in the private room, when we enter the code 1983, we see camera footage of the FNaF 4 home. Understanding these Easter eggs could change our understanding and knowledge of FNaF 4's story. How? Let me show you. But before we dive through these Easter eggs, let's quickly go back to FNaF 4 and remind ourselves what the story of that game was. In the minigames, we play as the crying child, and after witnessing something that horrified us, he is now scared of the spring suits. And even more unfortunate, his older brother, Michael, bullies him relentlessly. And in Crying Child's birthday party, Michael puts him in Fredbear's mouth and the robot crushes the child's skull. He is then quickly sent to a hospital, but the wounds are too severe. Michael apologizes to his brother, and then another speaker tells Bite Victim he will put him back together. Then the child dies. And as for the nightmare themselves, we play as Mike Afton. After his recent experience in FNaF 1, we know that we play as Michael in those nightmares, despite what other media tells us. Because thanks to the logbook, we see Michael draw Nightmare Fredbear or Nightmare on the page under Recent Dreams. And in the game itself, we hear Phone Guy's FNaF 1 phone call being played in the background. Which tells us that the nightmares happen close to the events of that game. Furthermore, Chica enters the kitchen like in FNaF 1. And Freddy is more active in the dark like in FNaF 1.
Interestingly enough, Freddy himself doesn't come off stage very often. I've heard he becomes a lot more active in the dark though.
Michael survives 8 nights from these nightmares and defeats the creature that's causing it, Nightmare. So that's the basic story of FNaF 4. So now let's go back to the breaker room map layouts and the private room cameras and see what they are about. Let's first cover the breaker room layouts one by one. The first map layout looks very similar to FNaF 4's minigame home. This is Crying Child's bedroom, and this is Elizabeth's room, and that is Fredbear's family diner. And the road from the house to Fredbear's matches what we see in FNaF 4. We also see 2 dots at Fredbear's, most likely being Fredbear and Spring Bonnie, and we see a dot in Crying Child's room representing the Crying Child. These dots are most likely out of date, since at this time, Fredbear's has closed down and Bite Victim is dead. The second layout is very similar to the layout of FNaF 4's gameplay. The 2 hallways, the closet, and the kitchen. And we see 4 dots representing the nightmare animatronics or the Funtimes, and 1 dot representing a human. This room is not connected to the FNaF 4 minigame home. What's also interesting is that this layout is called Observation. The third layout is the same layout as the Fun with Plush Trap minigame. We also see a dot representing a human. But what's odd is that there are 5 dots representing robots, 1 in the chair, while the other 4 are in the side rooms. So there could be 4 other plush traps. Maybe one of the extras could be Nightmare BB, since he's canon to FNaF 4. Alright, let's try to explain these rooms. It's very clear that the white dots represent humans, while the darker dots represent the animatronics, because we see the dark dots are located where the sister location animatronics currently are. While these dots are accurate, the other ones are not so much, because as I stated, the white dots representing the Crying Child is inaccurate, since he's dead by this time, and Fredbear and Spring Bonnie can't be at Fredbear's since it's closed down, so the animatronics have no reason to be there. And in the plush trap room, we see a dot in the location of the chair, while in the private room cameras, we see that no one is sitting on the chair. So these dots are most likely either outdated, or some are just designated areas that the animatronics are supposed to be in. So the FNaF rooms were real at some point. But why? What was William doing there? And what was he observing? Are the dots in the FNaF 4 rooms the nightmares or the Funtimes designated areas, tormenting whoever is being used as a test dummy? If these were the Funtimes, it could explain why Baby and Funtime Freddy are in FNaF 4 in Help Wanted. And when we play either of these levels, we see an Easter egg of a Biddy Bab. So the 4 dots could represent Baby, Funtime Freddy, and the 2 Bitty Babs. And in Plush Trap's level, we can also get an Easter egg of a Minarena in one of these side doors. These Minarenas could represent the extra dots that are in the layout. That all sounds very convincing, right? Well, this is FNaF and nothing is as simple as it seems, because I'm here to tell you that the dark dots in the FNaF 4 rooms aren't the Funtimes, but rather the nightmares, and they are in fact real. Kinda. Let me explain. Why do I think the dark dots represent the nightmares instead of the Funtimes? It's because the one place where the Funtimes can't be is at Fredbear's, and these dots are most likely representing Fredbear and Spring Bonnie. And the dot in Plush Trap's room is most definitely Plush Trap, since we do see Plush Trap in the real world, and he's the only character in FNaF 4 that isn't referred to as a nightmare. So if he's real, it could be the same case for the others as well, and I mean, they are located in the same places as in FNaF 4. So we can come to the conclusion that the nightmares Mike experienced was at some point real, and FNaF 4 happened twice in the timeline. Adding on to that, this is also supported by the fact that in Ultimate Custom Night, we hear Nightmare Freddy say,
I am remade, but not by you, by the one you should not have killed.
he was remade, and not by us, aka William. This line informs us that Nightmare Freddy was once built by William, then rebuilt not by William, but by the vengeful spirit. But like I said, I don't think they were real in the way you think, because I don't think they actually look like how we see them in the games, since they are still called nightmares. I think they most likely resemble the twisted animatronics when their illusion discs are off, where they are described as spring-lock animatronics with soft and plastic shells, with no paint and fur. They also have faceplates similar to the Funtimes, and a ribcage that opens up to capture people. So the nightmares would have looked very different to how we see them in FNaF 4. That is also supported by the fact that Nightmare Freddy also says,
I am given flesh to be your tormentor.
he was given flesh, which are his fur and gums, because before, he was just plastic and metal. And I think we see one of these real nightmares in Sister location. Where? Well, I think it's the spring suit from Night 4. Let me explain. The twisted robots are described to have faceplates that are similar to the Funtimes, and they are also spring-lock suits, like the suit in Night 4. The spring suit also has no paint and fur, like the Twisteds. If this assumption is correct, this could explain why Scott didn't decide to answer what suit it is in the Docker interview.
So, in Night 4, when we're inside the suit, a lot of people wanted to know, whose suit is that?
Whose suit is that? I'm afraid I'm not going to be able to answer that for you.
That's fine.
That's gonna have to remain a topic of discussion.
It wasn't as simple as a spring chica or a large Minarena. This suit was once used in the nightmare experiments. That's why Baby tells us,
I don't think it was ever used. At least not the way it was meant to be used. Too dangerous.
not the way it was meant to be used, which tells us that this isn't just a regular spring suit that someone wears. It's a suit that captures people and kills them with the spring locks. So when were these experiments conducted? Well, judging by the private room code that accesses the cameras of these rooms, I think it's most likely 1983. Why William chose that date I will explain later on. This date is another reason why I don't think the dots represent the Funtimes. It is because at this point they haven't existed yet. I believe they were created after the Bite of 83 and the Missing Children's incident, because after the Missing Children's incident, William would have had the knowledge that a child's spirit can possess the robot when they die inside them. So he builds the Funtimes to capture and kill children inside them, to make them possessed like the classic gang, and experiment with Remnant. He wouldn't know about Remnant until the kids possessed the metal endoskeletons, whereas the twisted robots in the novel were only built to capture their victims inside them and spring-lock them, and then spit them out to let them bleed out. They are just killing machines. A person can only survive if they stay completely still and to control their breathing, like we see Charlie and Mike do. So William would have built the nightmares that can kill their victims with spring locks, and then later, after 1985, created the Funtimes, which parallels the novel trilogy, because William built the Twisted Robots very early in the timeline, because they're described as older technology by Charlie, then created the Funtimes to learn more about Remnant. Having the Funtimes in the FNaF 4 levels in Help Wanted could be easily explained as Fazbear Entertainment just put them there since Steve Snodgrass, the indie game developer, never completed the 4th game, so it was left incomplete. So Fazbear's just put the Funtimes to fill in the roster, along with Nightmare Fredbear and Nightmare Rion. These map layouts also clears up some confusion of the FNaF 4 home and the minigames compared to the house we see in the menu and Curse of Dreadbear. The inconsistency being that the house we see in the menu is in a forest, while the house we see in the minigame is in a residential area, and Fredbear's is right next to it, while the home in the menu doesn't have Fredbear's next to it. So how does Sister Location solve these inconsistencies? By telling us that the FNaF 4 home we see in the menu and the home in the minigames are completely different houses. And the house we see in the menu is the same place where the nightmare experiments and Mike's nightmares occurred. It is also the same home that Mike lives in by the time of Sister Location, since we see the same lamp, pictures. So now we know Afton owns 2 homes. The plush art room could also be in the same home in the forest, since we see in Help Wanted that both rooms are in the same house. Okay, let's just quickly recap what we discussed before we continue. In the early 80s, Afton created a facility under his 2 homes. At the time, Fredbear's was still operational. He builds 4 spring lock robots, which I'm just gonna call the experiments, to differentiate them from the nightmares. The experiments are Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, and Foxy, and he builds multiple plush traps, which are most likely modified finger traps from the merchandise, and one of them are a modified BB toy as well. He puts them in his home in the woods, where no one would be able to see or hear what's going on. Then he puts a person to test out the robots. Alright, let's continue. There are still some questions that need to be answered. Why did William build the experiment animatronics? What were their purpose? Where's the real-life counterpart of Nightmare Fredbear / Nightmare? And who was being used as a lab rat? Let's cover the experiment's purpose first. There are 3 possible answers. The first being, William wanted to test out capturing children to help him create the Funtimes, or he wanted to create robots that obey his commands, or he simply wanted to test out illusion discs on children. The first option is least likely, because as I said, he would have no reason to create the Funtimes during 1983, and the experiment robots are just killing machines, nothing more. The second option is likely, since we see William and the Twisted Ones control the animatronics when he became Springtrap to get Charlie, so maybe he wanted to see if he could control robots from his office. And the last possibility seems also likely, since that would tie in with the Twisted Ones even more, and could explain why one of the experiments would be at Circus Baby's Pizza World. It would use its illusion discs to make them look friendly towards children and lure them to Circus Baby to be captured. Second question is, where is the real Nightmare Fredbear or Nightmare? If the core 4 nightmares are somewhat real, where is Nightmare Fredbear? Well, I don't think he existed in real form, and only originated from Mike's nightmares. And I'm sure you're thinking of some problems from this. First, why does Nightmare Fredbear say,
"This time, there is more than an illusion to fear"?
and how does he exist in FNaF VR if he only came from Mike's nightmares? Well, I have an answer for both of these. When Nightmare Fredbear says there is more than an illusion to fear, I don't think he's referencing the illusion discs. I think the illusion part is because he's a nightmare, and nightmares are relatively harmless, and illusions of the mind. And if he was once real, why would he need to say that? He would have been already dangerous. There's also the fact that his other line is,
"I assure you, I am very real."
why would he say this if he was real once? If Nightmare Freddy acknowledged he was real once, why wouldn't Nightmare Fredbear? Simple. It's because he never existed in the real world. Alright, what about Help Wanted? How can he exist in the game if he's only in Mike's dreams? Well, first, Nightmare Yon is also in Help Wanted, and he canonically only appeared as a nightmare in William's Nightmares. So Nightmare Yon in the real world could be just a video game character, or an agony creature. So that could also be the case for Nightmare Fredbear. But the other reason is more convincing, which is Fazbear Entertainment knows about Nightmare Fredbear because Mike drew him in the logbook. So when Mike eventually loses the logbook, Fazbear Entertainment could have easily seen Nightmare Fredbear drawn on it, and decided to put him in Help Wanted. So in the end, Nightmare Fredbear never existed in the real world, and only came from Mike's and William's nightmares. So now let's move on to one of the most important questions of this video. Who was being used as a test dummy? The only candidates are Crying Child or Michael. If it was the Crying Child, it would explain why he's marked on the map layouts. It would also give us an answer of why he's scared of the yellow spring suits. And when Cassidy writes down, "Was your favorite childhood toy the plastic purple telephone?" that would make sense, since we see it in the room. This could be a slam dunk. But there are few issues and problems with this. We see that the Crying Child calls the Core 4 his friends. And no, he's not talking about the Fredbear plush as well, he's only talking about the Classic 4. And if they were the same characters that were used in the Nightmare experiments, why would Crying Child say that they're his friends? That would also create problems with Crying Child being afraid of Fredbear, since like we discussed, Nightmare Fredbear never existed in the real world, just the Core 4 and plush traps. Why would he be afraid of Fredbear if he never tried to catch him? Also, we know that the bite victim saw something in the shadows he misunderstood, and if he's seeing large animatronics trying to get him, that's not misunderstanding. That's what he actually saw. What about Michael? Could he be the test dummy? If he was, it would make sense that he can re-experience these events as nightmares, mixed with his experience in FNaF 1 and the death of his brother. A lot of people argue that the bite victim was the test dummy and gives Michael nightmares of his experience in the future. But that's not true. The nightmares are caused by Nightmare, the Nightmare, which is Shadow Freddy, thanks to the game files calling Nightmare's first appearance in the game Shadow Freddy. This is Shadow Freddy's night. He's the one causing the nightmares, not bite victim. What about the purple telephone? My answer to that is, Cassidy could have been asking Mike that question, since we don't get a response from bite victim. Why do I think that? Look at the question itself again. Was your favorite childhood toy a plastic purple telephone? Why would she specifically say childhood toy when talking to a child? Why not just, what was your favorite toy? Simple. Because she was asking Mike about his favorite toy from his childhood. So the room in FNaF 4 is Mike's old childhood room that he later comes back to during Sister location. But here's the thing. I think the test dummy was intended to be the Crying Child, because William was keeping an eye on him with the Fredbear plush and marking him on the map layouts. But after the bite of 83, William uses Michael instead. That's why the code is 1983, because it's the year of the bite. It was a message for us at the time to know what year this bite took place in, and a hint on when these experiments occurred. The code is referencing the bite of 83 and Crying Child's death. William wouldn't have any other reason to make the code 1983. So the most likely unfortunate victim is Michael, with William either knocking out Michael each night and dragging his body to the house, or he's forcing him to go there. Alright, now how do all of these pieces fit together? In the early 80s, during Fredbear's run, William builds his underground facility under his two homes, and connects it to them and Fredbear's as well for easy access. He wanted to build spring-lock robots of his design, inspired by Henry's work with Fredbear and Spring Bonnie. He wanted to build robots that were, in William's eyes, better than Henry's. He wanted to control the robots from his office, and that can obey his commands. So he builds 4 robots based on Fredbear's newest friends from the cartoons, Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, and Foxy. And he also modifies a Spring Bonnie and Balloon Boy toy. During its development, the Crying Child sees something at Fredbear's that makes him scared of the yellow spring suits. And it doesn't help that kids started a stupid rumor that Fredbear comes to life at night and hides your body and never tells anyone. So William builds him a yellow Fredbear plush with a speaker inside, with him sometimes speaking through it or using already pre-recorded lines if he was too busy to talk to him directly. He makes it so that bite victim can only hear it. Michael, seeing the attention his brother is getting, becomes jealous and starts bullying and scaring him. William, being a definite father of the year, just leaves the kid tormented and terrified. After the Core 4 experiments were built, William wanted to experiment with illusion discs, something Henry invented after the death of his daughter. So he steals the illusion discs and makes more of them using his company, After Robotics. He puts it on the experiment animatronics. He wanted to see if it would have different effects on each person, whether it would make a difference if the subject is afraid of the mascots or not. If they were scared, would they see a horrific monster? And if not, would they see a cartoon character come to life? So to find out, he torments the bite victim through the Fredbear plush and makes him more scared of the robots. After he finished building the experiment animatronics, and the designated areas for everyone are ready, bite victim is about to be tested on in Michael's old room. But then he's dead. William was furious over Michael for ruining his plan and being the reason Fredbear is closed, so he drags Michael to his old childhood room for his punishment and uses him in his experiments. He would already be somewhat scared of the robots after seeing his brother got chomped by one. William would watch from his office underground using the code 1983 to access the cameras. And after a little while, William ends the experiments and stores the experiment animatronics in the facility. While Michael survived his punishment physically, mentally, he'll never forget this experience. In 1985 or 1986, when Circus Baby's Pizza World was in development, William wanted to use one of the experiment robots with illusion discs to help Baby or Funtime Freddy capture a child, but when that failed, he stores them again in the facility. In 1993, Mike works at Freddy's, either because of his father's orders or because he just wanted the money. But after experiencing the same cat and mouse game like a decade before, he starts to have nightmares of his past experience with his father's experiments. Then Shadow Freddy attaches himself to Mike and amplifies these nightmares. Mike survives 8 nights of this torture before Shadow Freddy moves on elsewhere. But again, Mike would still never forget these nightmares. Even 30 years later, he would still remember the nightmare itself. After all that leaves us with one final question. What happened to the experiment animatronics? While there's no definitive answer, there are 2 assumptions I can make. The first could be they were destroyed after the events of Sister Location, or they were left to rot until Fazbear Entertainment was revived, so they collected them and scanned them into the VR game. That's how we see the nightmares in VR. But like I said, we don't really know, and I don't think we'll ever really see them in any game again, since there's no reason to bring them back. But time will tell. Alright, now the video's over. If you liked it, please like, subscribe, all that jazz, and comment if you agree or disagree in this video. And yeah, see you on the flip side.